As you can see, I've got a heap of little knives here that I need to finish, so we're just going to follow the process through from the rough filing phase where we're at now to the finished product. So with this knife, I've just finished filing down the bevel of the blade. Nothing special. As you can see, I've gone a bit crazy here, missed a few bits and bobs, and this actually has a couple of little scratches in it which were probably in the aluminium when I cut it, or because I cut it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a multi-tool, and I use 180 grit sanding pad on the multi-tool, and that is just going to get rid of a lot of these little grooves from the file and bring it down to a nice sort of the first kind of smooth finish, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so that's got the worst of the file marks out of it, but you do have to be a bit careful when you're using the multi-tool with 180 or 240 grit sanding discs on it, because you can get these little, see these little squiggle marks if you're not careful, like I was not careful, and they can be quite tricky to get out. So I do tend to, I don't go any lower really than 320 or maybe 400 on the flat of the blade, because yeah, those little marks can be really quite stubborn. Obviously, once I finish the blade, I just go through the whole process, 180 grit and 240 grit on the handle as well, and any exposed metal parts of the handle. And then I basically go through the whole process again with 240 grit on the edges of the blade. I've gone over all the knives now with the multi-tool and the 240 grit sanding pad, just to make sure I've got all the little nicks out that I want, or as many as I could, and just to make sure that there's no little sharp edges or anything left on the knife. Obviously that's the ultimate goal of a training knife, is no sharp edges. Now we're going to kick off with the really boring part. What I'm going to do, I've got some 240 grit sandpaper, and I am going to sand basically the handle, the exposed parts, and all the edges of the blade. I'm just going to make sure that I leave the flat of the blade. I don't want to go too deep on that. So we'll go from there. Now that I've gone over the handle and all the exposed areas of the tang and pins and along the edges, I just want to focus on the bevel of the blade. And what I'm going to do there is I'm just going to sand it just by hand in a linear motion, that way, just to make sure that everything's running smoothly through there, and just to further delineate the actual line of the bevel, which doesn't look great, as you can see here. We'll fix that in the mix. Yeah, we just want to make sure that that's coming up nice and smooth, and all the scratches are actually running in that direction. You don't want them going that way, not good. Now that I'm reasonably happy with the handles and the bevels on all of these little knives, I'm going to start working on the flats of the blade. Like I said before, I don't normally like to go below 400 grit sandpaper on the flat of the blade, and I can do that when I've been careful, but as you can see, I've not been careful with these, so I'm going to go down to 320 grit. Obviously it's a bit rougher, and I'm just going to use a bit of silicone spray. I'm going to do like a wet dry sand and try and get rid of all these little squiggly bits and some of these deeper scratches. So that's the 320 grit wet and dry sand done on the blade now, and I've given the handle belt, just a dry sand with the 320 grit as well. So as you can see, it's looking a bit more like a training knife now. There's still a few little glitchy bits in it that, you know, some of them are just going to be there now forever. I could go back down and to a 240 grit, but, you know, who's got time, really? But they're looking pretty good. Next, I'm going to move on to the 400 grit sandpaper and go through the whole process again. Wet and dry on the blade, dry on the handle. From there, I'll move up to the 600, 800, 1000, and 1200. And if I can find some, I'll use the 2000 grit sandpaper as well. Basically, the same process all the way through. I'm not going to bother filming it for you because I imagine you know what it looks like to sand things. And then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so both knives have been through the entire process of what I go from 320 to 1200 grit sandpaper. I didn't use 2000 grit because I can't remember where I put it, but I would have. So that's that part done. Quite long and painful, but we got there in the end. So the next step is buffing. So I've got my little buffing wheel set up here. I'm going to use a coarse, medium and fine cutting compounds. I'm just going to buff up the blade of this. I'll also do the tang and the pins just to give it a little bit of a shine. So we'll crack on with that. Let's see how we go.
She my kryptonite, that's every night. Can't get enough, creeping up. My flow gets fine, baby. You know I've been working towards.
There you go, nice and shiny. Obviously, I've just got to clean up these handles and oil them. Normally, what I'll end up doing is I'll do the process of the medium and fine buffing again after I've done the oiling on the handles, just mainly because I'll end up scratching something as a rule, or just putting a little mark on them, so the blades normally get another going over. But yeah, they've come up alright. That's pretty much it. The only other step for the blade usually is just a little bit of aluminium polish at the end. So there you go. Hopefully this is helpful. This is just the way that I do it. Like I said before, I'm all self-taught, so you know, there's no doubt in my mind that it is not the easiest and quickest way of doing this. Obviously, any suggestions that anybody have that can speed things up for me, that would be much appreciated. There you go. Hopefully this helps.